My sister asserted I was due to give her my inheritance for her family. Instead, I made flight plans. Hours later, Mom sent a text, "Give it to her, or you're not welcome home." That evening, I sealed everything away. 43 missed calls glared from my phone screen, each one a stark white number against the black background, punctuated by a rage-fueled voicemail from my father that still echoed in my ears. The world outside my Chicago apartment office, usually a calming panorama of steel and glass, blurred into an insignificant backdrop as the phone call had come just an hour before, slicing through the quiet hum of quarterly reports. My mother's voice had that particular tone, a finely honed instrument of expectation she'd perfected over the years, the one that implied I was already failing her before she'd even articulated her demand. "Your grandmother left you everything in her will," she'd stated, no preamble, no gentle easing into the news. "The house, the investment accounts, all of it. Your father, and I think you should split it with Olivia. It's only fair." My grip tightened around the pen I'd been holding, the plastic groaning under the pressure. Fair? That word had become a weapon in our family, always deployed with surgical precision whenever my older sister, Olivia, wanted something that didn't rightfully belong to her. I stared out at the city skyline, the metallic taste of disbelief coating my tongue. Grandma Ruth had passed 3 weeks ago, and I'd flown home to Minnesota for the funeral, steeped in a grief that felt both profound and private. Not a single person had whispered a word about an inheritance then, not a hint of her estate's distribution. "Grandma Ruth made her own decisions about her assets," I said, my voice carefully low, each word feeling like a stone dropped into a deep well. If she wanted Olivia to have something, she would have included her in the will. The silence on the other end stretched, long and waited, until I instinctively checked my phone to confirm the call hadn't disconnected. When my mother finally spoke, her voice had morphed into that injured, martyred quality that unfailingly made my stomach clench. "I cannot believe how selfish you've become since moving to that city. Olivia has 2 children to think about. Mason is only 4, and they're trying for another baby. You're single with no responsibilities. What do you even need that money for?" I closed my eyes, counting to 5, trying to regulate the frantic beat of my heart before I responded. Grandma Ruth had been the only person in my family who never made me feel like my life choices required justification. She'd supported my decision to pursue architecture instead of joining my father's insurance firm, celebrated when I landed my position at Crawford and Associates, one of Chicago's premier design studios. She'd listened without judgment when I explained why I wasn't interested in marriage or children, at least not in the immediate future, not in the way my family seemed to think I should want. Here's the thing. While many families might see a child's independent life as a source of pride, my family viewed it as a personal affront, an implicit critique of their own conventional path, and a resource not yet optimized for their benefit. "I need to get back to work," I told my mother, the words a thin shield against her emotional assault. "We can discuss this another time." "There's nothing to discuss. Your father expects you to do the right thing." She disconnected before I could even formulate a retort. I sat there, phone still warm in my hand, anger and a dull ache of familiar hurt warring inside my chest. The really infuriating part was that I wasn't even surprised. This pattern had defined my relationship with my family for as long as I could remember. Olivia wanted, Olivia received, and everyone else was expected to facilitate her happiness. But this time, something felt different. Growing up, I'd watched my parents bend over backward to accommodate my sister's every whim. When she decided she wanted to be a cheerleader, they'd pay for expensive camps and competition fees. When I'd asked for art classes, my father had suggested I check out books from the library instead. Olivia's college education had been fully funded, while I graduated with $40,000 in student loans that I'd only just finished paying off 2 years ago. The inequity hadn't bothered me as much as the expectation that I should be grateful for the scraps. My mother had actually told me once that I was lucky Olivia was so generous with her hand-me-down clothes, as if wearing my sister's cast-offs was some kind of privilege. This dynamic, where one child is consistently favored and the other is expected to be accommodating, often breeds resentment and an unhealthy sense of entitlement in the favored child. Psychologically, it can stunt the ability to cope with delayed gratification or rejection, as their formative experiences have taught them that their desires are paramount. My phone buzzed, vibrating on the desk like a trapped insect. I glanced down to see Olivia's name on the screen. Mom told me about the inheritance. I'm so glad Grandma Ruth left you something. We should grab coffee soon and talk about how to handle everything. The kids are going to need new winter coats and Mason's starting preschool. It's so expensive. I deleted the message without responding. My hands were shaking slightly as I tried to return my attention to the report spread across my desk, but concentration proved impossible. Instead, I found myself pulling up my email and searching for the message from my grandmother's attorney, Lawrence Whitfield. The estate was substantial. Grandma Ruth's house in Stillwater was worth approximately $400,000. The investment accounts totaled another $600,000. There were smaller assets, too: her car, jewelry, furniture. Mr. Whitfield had explained in his initial email that my grandmother had been very specific about her wishes. Everything was to go to me, with one exception: a $20,000 donation to the animal shelter where she'd volunteered for 15 years. I'd been too overwhelmed by grief to really process what this meant then. Grandma Ruth had been 87 years old, sharp as ever, until a stroke took her suddenly one morning while she was working in her garden. We'd spoken on the phone just 2 days before she died. She'd asked about my current project, a sustainable housing development on the south side. She'd wanted to know if I was eating properly, if I'd been taking time to enjoy the city, if work was fulfilling or just consuming me. Never once during that conversation had she mentioned her will or her estate planning. Looking back, I wondered if she'd known somehow that her time was limited. Or maybe she'd simply reached an age where she understood that death could arrive without warning, and she'd wanted her affairs in order. My phone rang again. This time it was Olivia calling directly. I let it go to voicemail. Within 30 seconds, she'd called back. I declined the call, flipping my phone face down on the desk. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I tried to focus on the housing project, but my mind kept circling back to my family's demands, their suffocating expectations. By the time I left the office at 7, I'd made a decision, a quiet, steel-edged resolve solidifying in my gut. I was going to Minnesota this weekend to handle my grandmother's estate in person. I was going to meet with Mr. Whitfield, tour the house one final time, and make arrangements for its sale. And I was going to do all of this without my family's input or approval. I booked a flight for Friday evening from my apartment that night, then sent a brief email to Mr. Whitfield requesting a Saturday morning meeting. His response arrived within the hour, confirming our appointment for 10 o'clock. Thursday brought a barrage of increasingly hostile messages from my mother. Each text followed the same basic pattern: I was being selfish. I was disappointing everyone. I needed to think about Olivia's children. Didn't I care about family? What would Grandma Ruth think of my behavior? That last one almost made me laugh. Grandma Ruth had known exactly what my family was like. She'd witnessed decades of their favoritism toward Olivia. She'd watched them dismiss my accomplishments while celebrating my sister's mediocre achievements. And she'd made her decision about her estate with full knowledge of these dynamics. This kind of psychological manipulation, often termed gaslighting, attempts to make the target doubt their own perceptions and sanity, using guilt and questioning of moral character to control behavior. By invoking Grandma Ruth's name, they were trying to twist her memory into an instrument of their own agenda. Thursday evening, my phone lit up with an incoming call from my father. I'd been expecting this. My mother always deployed him when her emotional manipulation failed to achieve the desired results. "Your mother is very upset," he said without greeting. "You're tearing this family apart over money." Grandma Ruth's will is tearing the family apart. I kept my voice level despite the anger building in my chest, a hot, prickling sensation beneath my skin. Or is it the fact that you all think you're entitled to decide what I do with my inheritance? Don't take that tone with me. I'm your father, and I deserve respect. Respect goes both ways. I'm not giving Olivia half of Grandma Ruth's estate. If that makes me selfish in your eyes, I can live with that judgment. He launched into a lecture about family obligations and shared resources. The same speech I'd heard countless times growing up. I half listened while finishing my packing, murmuring occasional acknowledgments to indicate I was still on the line. When he finally paused for breath, I seized the opportunity to end the conversation. My flight leaves in 2 hours. I'll call you when I'm back in Chicago. You're going to Minnesota? Your mother and I forbid it. You're not to touch anything in that house until we've all sat down as a family and discussed this properly. The absurdity of two people in their 60s trying to forbid their 32-year-old daughter from traveling made something inside me snap. The blood rushed from my head, leaving a ringing in my ears. I'm the sole beneficiary of Grandma Ruth's estate. The house belongs to me. The accounts belong to me, and I'll handle them however I see fit. Goodbye. I ended the call and immediately switched my phone to airplane mode. Let them rage into the void for a while. I needed peace and quiet to think, to simply be without their constant clamor for more. Friday afternoon, I finished packing my bags and confirmed my evening flight details one final time before heading to the airport. The flight to Minneapolis was blessedly uneventful. I picked up my rental car and drove the 40 minutes to Stillwater as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. My grandmother's house sat on a quiet street lined with mature oak trees, a modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch. I'd spent countless summer afternoons on that porch, listening to Grandma Ruth tell stories about her childhood or sharing my own dreams and plans. Using the key Mr. Whitfield had mailed me, I let myself inside. The house still smelled like her perfume and the lavender sachets she'd kept in every closet, a scent that brought an unexpected wave of sorrow and comfort. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her reading glasses on the side table, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen counter, her gardening clogs by the back door. I walked through each room slowly, my fingers trailing over familiar objects, fighting back the sting of tears. This house held decades of memories. Olivia and I had played here as children during weekend visits. Later, after I'd moved to Chicago, I'd come back several times a year to spend time with Grandma Ruth. She'd been my sanctuary, the one person who'd never made me feel inadequate or wanting. In her bedroom, I found a leather journal on her nightstand. I almost didn't open it. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but something compelled me to pick it up and flip through the pages. The entries were sporadic, brief observations about her daily life, mixed with longer reflections on family and aging. One entry from 6 months ago caught my eye. Had lunch with Evelyn today. She spent the entire meal complaining about her younger daughter. Apparently, the girl won't loan Olivia money for a kitchen renovation. Evelyn seems to think Olivia is entitled to her sister's salary simply because she has children. I reminded her that adults make their own financial decisions, but she didn't want to hear it. I'm more convinced than ever that I've made the right choice with my will. Olivia has always had everything handed to her. Perhaps it's time for balance. I read the passage 3 times, my throat tight with emotion, a lump forming that made it difficult to swallow. Grandma Ruth had understood. She'd seen the inequity and made her decision accordingly. This wasn't about punishing Olivia or rewarding me. It was about finally recognizing that I deserved something, too, that my life and choices had value, even if they didn't align with my family's expectations. I spent the night in my grandmother's house, sleeping in the guest room where I'd stayed during childhood visits, the familiar patterns on the wallpaper like old friends. In the morning, I met with Mr. Whitfield at his office downtown. He was a kind man in his late 60s who'd handled my grandmother's legal affairs for over 30 years. Your grandmother was very clear about her intentions, he told me, sliding a copy of the will across his desk. She met with me 4 times in the last year to ensure everything was properly structured. She anticipated there might be family conflict, and she wanted you to know that her decision was made with full mental capacity and complete understanding of its implications. Did she say why she left everything to me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Whitfield smiled slightly, a gentle crinkle around his eyes. She said you were the only one who never expected anything from her. The only one who visited because you wanted her company, not because you wanted something. She was very proud of you and what you'd accomplished on your own. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over, a hot, cleansing stream down my cheeks. Mr. Whitfield politely pretended not to notice, giving me time to compose myself while he reviewed the estate documents. We spent the next 2 hours going over details. The house would need to be appraised and either sold or transferred into my name. The investment accounts required paperwork to shift ownership. There were tax implications to consider, timelines to follow. My head was spinning by the time we finished, but I had a clear plan forward. "One more thing," Mr. Whitfield said as I was gathering my purse to leave. "Your grandmother left you a letter. She asked me to give it to you after we discussed the estate." He handed me a cream-colored envelope with my name written in her distinctive, elegant script. I waited until I was back in the rental car to open it. The letter was dated 2 months before her death. "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're likely dealing with your family's reactions to my will. I'm sorry to put you in this position, but I trust you to handle it with more grace than they'll show you. I've watched your parents favor Olivia your entire life. I've seen them dismiss your achievements and burden you with expectations they never placed on your sister. And I've seen you rise above it all, becoming a remarkable woman despite their failures to appreciate you. This inheritance isn't about money. It's about recognition. You deserve to be valued. You deserve to have something that's entirely yours, something nobody can take away or demand you share. You deserve to know that at least one person in your family saw your worth. Don't let them bully you into surrendering what you've earned simply by being yourself. Stand firm. Your grandmother is very proud of you. All my love, Ruth." I sat in that parking lot and sobbed until my throat hurt and my eyes were swollen, a visceral release of years of pent-up emotion. Then I dried my face, started the car, and drove back to her house. I had work to do. I spent the weekend sorting through my grandmother's belongings, setting aside items to donate, and packing up things I wanted to keep. Her jewelry, her photo albums, her collection of vintage teacups. These would come back to Chicago with me. The furniture could be sold with the house. The clothes would go to charity. I turned my phone back on Saturday evening, bracing myself for the onslaught. The screen lit up with a furious cascade: 43 missed calls, 17 voicemails, 62 text messages. I scrolled through them with a growing sense of surreal detachment. My mother's messages started out pleading and evolved into threats. If I didn't transfer half the inheritance to Olivia immediately, I shouldn't bother coming home for holidays. My father would be so disappointed. I was breaking my mother's heart. How could I be so cruel to my own sister? Olivia's messages followed a similar trajectory. Early ones were wheedling and manipulative, full of references to her children's needs and her tight budget. Later messages turned vicious. I was selfish. I'd always been jealous of her. I was going to die alone because I was too self-centered to maintain relationships. My father had left a single voicemail, and his tone made my blood run cold. "You have exactly 24 hours to make this right with your sister. If you don't transfer that money, you're no longer welcome in this family. Your mother agrees with me. Choose wisely." The ultimatum should have scared me. Instead, it crystallized something that had been building for years, an undeniable truth that resonated with Ruth's words. These people didn't love me. They loved what they could extract from me. They loved having a scapegoat, someone to blame when things went wrong, someone to sacrifice to Olivia's endless appetite for more. This realization marks a critical psychological shift for victims of emotional manipulation. Moving from a mindset of guilt and obligation to one of self-preservation and boundary setting is often a painful but necessary step to break free from toxic family systems. I opened my banking app and checked my personal accounts. Then I called Mr. Whitfield's emergency line, apologizing for the weekend intrusion. "No need to apologize," he said warmly. "What can I do for you?" "I want to lock down the estate completely. No access for anyone but me. Can we do that?" "Absolutely. As the sole beneficiary, you have complete control. I can file the necessary paperwork first thing Monday morning. Nobody will be able to touch any of the assets without your explicit permission. Please do that. And Mr. Whitfield, if anyone from my family contacts you asking questions or making demands, you have my permission to tell them nothing. Understood? I'll email you confirmation once everything is filed." I thanked him and ended the call, then opened my mother's most recent message. It had arrived 20 minutes ago. Transfer the money to Olivia or don't bother coming home. You're not our daughter if you can't do this one thing for family. I drafted my response carefully, deleting and rewriting several times before I was satisfied. I've locked down the entire estate. No one has access but me. Grandma Ruth left me her assets because she knew what this family really is. She saw how you treated me my whole life, and she made her choice accordingly. I'm making mine now too. Lose my number. I hit send, then immediately blocked both my parents and Olivia across every platform: phone, email, social media. Let them scream into the void. I was done listening. Sunday morning brought an unexpected knock on my grandmother's door. I opened it to find my Aunt Valerie, my mother's younger sister, standing on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "Your mother called me," she said without preamble. "Mind if I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Aunt Valerie had always been the black sheep of my mother's family, divorced twice, childless by choice, opinionated to a fault. We'd never been particularly close, but she'd never been actively hostile either. We sat at my grandmother's kitchen table, and I braced myself for whatever lecture she'd come to deliver. "Your mother thinks I can convince you to share the inheritance with Olivia," Aunt Valerie said, taking a sip of her coffee. I told her she was delusional, but she insisted I try. "So, I'm here to officially tell you, don't give Olivia a single penny." I blinked in surprise. "Really?" Ruth knew exactly what she was doing. "She talked to me about it several months ago, wanted my opinion on how your parents would react. I told her they'd lose their minds, and she said that was fine. She was tired of watching them sacrifice you on the altar of Olivia's ego." Valerie set down her cup and looked at me intently. "You know what your sister did last year?" I shook my head, a sense of dread creeping up my spine. "She asked your parents to co-sign a loan for a new SUV, $30,000. They did it without hesitation, even though they're supposed to be saving for retirement. Then Olivia missed 3 payments in a row, tanked their credit score, and blamed it on unexpected expenses. She never even apologized. Why didn't they tell me? Because they didn't want you to think badly of your perfect sister. Your mother actually said that to me. She was worried it would poison your relationship with Olivia." Aunt Valerie laughed bitterly, as if Olivia's own behavior wasn't doing that just fine. We talked for over an hour. Aunt Valerie filled me in on years of family drama I'd been shielded from: Olivia's pattern of borrowing money and never repaying it, her habit of showing up at my parents' house with expensive purchases while claiming she couldn't afford necessities for her kids, the way she had manipulated my mother into providing free childcare 3 days a week. Aunt Valerie provided an external, objective perspective, crucial for someone enmeshed in a dysfunctional family system. Her insights helped the narrator understand that her experiences were not unique to her, but part of a larger, systemic pattern of family dynamics and parental enabling. "Your grandmother watched all of this and made her decision," Valerie said as she was leaving. "Honor it. And if you need someone in your corner while your parents throw their tantrum, call me." She left me her number and drove away, leaving me with a lot to think about. I'd spent so many years feeling like the problem child, the difficult one who didn't fit the family mold. Learning that at least one other person saw the dysfunction clearly was oddly validating, a powerful balm to years of self-doubt. I flew back to Chicago Sunday evening with 3 suitcases full of my grandmother's belongings and a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. Yes, I'd effectively severed ties with my immediate family. Yes, there would be consequences and complications. But for the first time in my life, I'd chosen myself. I'd drawn a boundary and defended it, and the feeling was exhilarating. Monday morning, Mr. Whitfield emailed to confirm the estate was completely locked down. Nobody could access anything without going through him, and he had strict instructions to deny all requests that didn't come directly from me. Tuesday afternoon, my mother showed up at my office. I was in a meeting when our receptionist, Jenna, knocked on the conference room door. "I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's a woman in the lobby claiming to be your mother. She's making quite a scene." I excused myself and walked to reception where my mother was indeed making a scene. She was crying loudly while Jenna and our office manager tried to calm her down, their faces a mixture of discomfort and polite concern. The moment she saw me, She rushed forward with her arms outstretched. "There you are, sweetheart. We need to talk. You can't just cut off your family like this." I stepped back before she could embrace me, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between us. "What are you doing here?" My voice was low, strained. "You blocked me. You blocked all of us. What was I supposed to do?" Her tears were flowing freely now, and I recognized the performance for what it was. My mother had always been able to cry on command, wielding her emotions like weapons, a calculated display meant to elicit guilt and compliance. "You were supposed to respect my decision." I kept my voice low and professional, acutely conscious of my coworkers watching this drama unfold from their cubicles. "I asked you not to contact me. Showing up at my workplace is inappropriate." "How can you say that? I'm your mother. You gave me an ultimatum. You told me I wasn't your daughter if I didn't give Olivia half of Grandma Ruth's estate. I made my choice. Now you need to leave." "I didn't mean it like that. I was upset. You know how your father gets. I need you to leave. If you don't go voluntarily, I'll call building security." My mother's face transformed from tearful to furious in an instant. "You ungrateful little building security," I said to Jenna, who was already reaching for her phone, a quiet relief washing over her face. "Please." My mother stormed out before security arrived, hurling insults over her shoulder as she went. I apologized to Jenna and our office manager, then returned to my meeting with burning cheeks and shaking hands, but a strange sense of victory bubbling beneath the surface. My supervisor, Patricia, pulled me aside afterward. "Family trouble?" she asked gently. I gave her the abbreviated version: inheritance dispute, toxic dynamics, necessary boundaries. Patricia listened without judgment, then squeezed my shoulder. "I went through something similar with my brother years ago. It gets better. The guilt fades. You did the right thing." Her words meant more than she probably realized. I'd been second-guessing myself constantly since blocking my family, wondering if I was overreacting or being cruel. Hearing validation from someone outside the situation helped quiet those doubts. The next few weeks brought a consistent pattern of harassment. My parents created new email addresses and social media accounts to get around my blocks. They sent letters to my apartment. They even tried calling my office directly, claiming there was a family emergency until I warned our receptionist to screen all calls. Olivia took a different approach. She started a fundraising campaign on social media, claiming she needed help with medical expenses for her children. Several mutual acquaintances from high school contacted me asking if I'd seen it, if I knew my sister was struggling so badly. I looked at the fundraiser once. The description was pure manipulation. Olivia painted herself as a struggling single mother, completely false. Her husband Trevor had a steady job, who'd been abandoned by her cruel, wealthy sister. There were photos of Mason and their daughter Aubrey looking sad and photogenic. The campaign raised almost $3,000 before someone reported it for containing false information, and it got taken down. I learned about this from Aunt Valerie, who'd been monitoring the situation and documenting everything in case I needed evidence for a restraining order later. "Your sister is something else," Valerie said during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. "She actually told your mother that you'd stolen her inheritance. Claimed Grandma Ruth had promised to leave the house to her." "That's completely fabricated." "Of course it is. But your mother wants to believe it, so she does. They're talking about contesting the will." That bit of news made my stomach drop, a cold dread pooling in my belly. Can they do that? They can try, but they won't succeed. Ruth was of sound mind. She worked with a reputable attorney. She updated her will multiple times over several months, which demonstrates clear intent, and you have that journal entry and the letter. Any judge would dismiss their case immediately. Still, the threat was enough to make me call Mr. Whitfield and put him on alert. He assured me the estate was airtight, but recommended I keep all evidence of my family's harassment just in case. 3 months after my grandmother's death, the house in Stillwater sold for asking price. After closing costs and fees, I netted $370,000. Combined with the investment accounts, I was suddenly sitting on close to $1 million in assets I'd never expected to have. The money was overwhelming. I'd been financially stable before, My salary at Crawford and Associates was generous, but this was different. This was generational wealth, the kind of security that changed life trajectories. I met with a financial advisor Aunt Valerie recommended, a woman named Christine, who specialized in helping clients manage sudden windfalls. We developed a comprehensive plan, pay off my car loan and the remainder of my student debt, max out my retirement contributions, establish a robust emergency fund, and invest the rest in a diversified portfolio. What about buying property? Christine asked, looking up from her notes. You work in architecture. Have you considered purchasing a place of your own? I had actually. I'd been renting my Chicago apartment for 5 years, watching property values climb steadily. With my grandmother's inheritance, I could afford a down payment on something substantial, maybe a condo in one of the neighborhoods I loved, or even a small house. Let me think about it, I told Christine. I want to be intentional with these decisions. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine and really considered what I wanted. The money meant freedom, but freedom to do what? I could stay in Chicago, invest in property, continue climbing the ladder at Crawford and Associates. Or I could take a risk, pursue something I'd been afraid to attempt without a safety net. I'd always wanted to start my own firm. Small-scale sustainable housing was my passion, designing affordable, environmentally conscious homes for people who had been priced out of conventional markets. It was exactly the kind of work that didn't generate huge profits, which was why most architecture firms avoided it. But with my grandmother's inheritance providing security, I could afford to take lower-profit projects. I could build a practice around my values instead of around maximizing billable hours. The idea terrified and exhilarated me in equal measure, a thrilling current of possibility surging through me. I spent the next week researching what it would take to start a firm, licensing requirements, insurance, startup costs, client acquisition strategies. The more I learned, the more convinced I became that this was possible. I gave my notice at Crawford and Associates on a Friday afternoon. Patricia was surprised but supportive. You've been ready for this for at least a year, she said. I've watched you get frustrated with the profit-driven decisions around here. Go build something better. My last day at the firm was bittersweet. I'd learned so much there, worked with talented people, contributed to projects I was genuinely proud of, but I was ready for the next chapter. I filed the paperwork to establish my own firm in December, 6 months after my grandmother's death. I called it Stillwater Design Studio in her honor. My first client was a young couple looking to build an affordable, energy-efficient home on the lot they'd inherited outside the city. The project was small, the budget tight, but the work was exactly what I wanted to be doing. Word spread slowly but steadily. By the end of my first year in business, I had 4 ongoing projects and a waiting list of potential clients. I hired an assistant, then a junior architect fresh out of grad school. We worked out of a small office in Logan Square, and I'd never been happier professionally. My family, meanwhile, had finally started to quiet down. The letters and attempted contact became less frequent, then stopped altogether. I heard through Aunt Valerie that my parents had essentially written me off, telling their friends I'd chosen money over family. Olivia had moved on to other sources of drama and financial support. I wasn't entirely unaffected by the estrangement. Sometimes I missed the idea of family, the fantasy of parents who actually cared about me as a person rather than as a resource. But I didn't miss the reality of who they actually were. The constant criticism, the favoritism, the expectation that I should diminish myself to make Olivia shine brighter. Around month 8 of running Stillwater Design Studio, something unexpected happened. I received an email from Trevor, Olivia's husband. The subject line read simply, "I'm sorry." I stared at it for a full minute, my breath held captive in my lungs, before opening it. Trevor and I had never been close. He'd always seemed pleasant enough during family gatherings, but he'd never intervened when Olivia or my parents were treating me poorly. I'd written him off as either oblivious or complicit. The email was lengthy and surprisingly candid. He explained that he'd only recently learned the full extent of what had happened with the inheritance. Olivia had told him I'd stolen money that was rightfully hers, that I'd manipulated Grandma Ruth into changing her will at the last minute. He believed her because, well, she was his wife and the mother of his children. Then he'd found the fundraising campaign she'd created, the one that had been taken down for false information. He confronted her about it, and the truth had slowly unraveled. She'd admitted there was no promised inheritance, that Grandma Ruth had made her wishes clear years ago. She'd acknowledged lying about her financial situation to generate sympathy. And when Trevor had pressed her about why she felt entitled to my inheritance, she'd said something that finally opened his eyes. "I've always gotten what I wanted from this family. She should have just given it to me." Trevor wrote that he was ashamed of not seeing the pattern sooner. He'd watched Olivia manipulate my parents for years, but had convinced himself it was normal family dynamics. The inheritance situation had forced him to recognize his wife's true character, and he was struggling with what that meant for their marriage. He wasn't asking for anything, he clarified. He just wanted me to know that not everyone in the family had been actively against me, and that he was sorry for his silence when I'd needed someone to speak up. I read the email 3 times, experiencing a complicated mix of emotions. Part of me appreciated the apology. Part of me resented that it had taken such an extreme situation for him to see what had been obvious for years. And part of me just felt tired. Tired of family drama. Tired of reliving old hurts. Tired of being the reasonable one who had to process everyone else's epiphanies. I drafted a brief response thanking him for his honesty, but making it clear I had no interest in resuming contact with that side of the family. Whatever happened between him and Olivia was their business. I'd built a new life, and I intended to protect it. His reply came within hours. "I understand completely. For what it's worth, Ruth would be incredibly proud of you. I saw the article about your firm in Chicago Magazine. You're doing exactly what you always talked about. That takes courage." The mention of the article made me smile despite myself. A local journalist had written a feature about emerging architecture firms focused on sustainability and affordability. Stillwater Design Studio had been prominently featured with photographs of our first completed project, that energy-efficient home for the young couple. The exposure had generated a flood of inquiries and helped establish our reputation. I closed Trevor's email and didn't respond again. Some connections were better left severed, even when apologies arrived late. By the time autumn rolled around, Stillwater Design Studio had grown beyond my initial projections. I'd hired 2 more architects and a full-time project manager. We'd moved into a larger office space in Pilsen with big windows that flooded the drafting area with natural light. The work was challenging and deeply satisfying, exactly the kind of creative problem-solving I dreamed about when I'd first fallen in love with architecture. Aunt Valerie became a regular presence in my life during this period. We met for dinner once a month, and she'd become something of a mentor to me. She'd built a successful career in nonprofit management after her second divorce, creating programs that helped women transition out of domestic violence situations. Her perspective on family dysfunction was hard-won and practical. "You know what the hardest part is?" she asked during one of our dinners, swirling the wine in her glass. "Accepting that some people will never understand why you had to walk away. Your mother genuinely believes she did nothing wrong. In her mind, asking you to sacrifice for Olivia was just normal family behavior. She'll probably die thinking you're the villain in the story. Does that get easier to accept?" Valerie considered the question while finishing her wine. "Not easier, exactly, but it matters less over time. You stop waiting for them to have an epiphany. You stop hoping they'll finally see you clearly. You just live your life and let them think whatever they need to think." Her words proved prophetic. Through mutual acquaintances, I occasionally heard updates about my parents and Olivia. My mother had apparently developed several health problems, nothing serious, but enough to give her ammunition for guilt trips about how her ungrateful daughter had abandoned her in her time of need. Olivia and Trevor were in marriage counseling, their relationship strained by financial stress and broken trust. My father had retired from his insurance firm and spent most of his time golfing and complaining about the younger generation's lack of family values. None of it touched me the way it would have a year earlier. I'd built enough distance, both physical and emotional, that their drama felt like weather happening in another city, observable but irrelevant to my daily life. On the first anniversary of my grandmother's death, I drove back to Stillwater. The new owners had painted the house a soft yellow and installed solar panels on the roof. The garden my grandmother had loved was blooming with roses and peonies. It looked happy, well tended, alive. I sat in my car across the street for a long time, remembering summers on that porch and winters in that kitchen, the comforting smells, the laughter, the quiet understanding. I thought about the letter my grandmother had left me, her final gift of recognition and validation. And I thought about the life I was building. One where I valued myself enough to set boundaries, to pursue meaningful work, to walk away from people who treated me like a bank account with a pulse. My phone buzzed with a message from Aunt Valerie. Thinking of you today. Ruth would be so proud of everything you've accomplished. I smiled and typed back a quick response, then started the car. I had a client meeting in Chicago that afternoon. Designs to finalize, a business to run. My grandmother had given me more than money. She'd given me permission to build a life on my own terms. This story isn't just about an inheritance. It's about the profound power of setting boundaries and redefining family. What would you risk to reclaim your self-worth from a lifetime of unmet expectations?